European tour. President Trump arrives in Great Britain for his first visit as commander-in-chief, amid NATO tensions, protests, and Brexit turmoil. Election push. Ahead of the midterms, Democrats push for new abortion protections, and attention shifts to states. The church in China. We talk with EWTN's Monsignor Figueiredo, who has returned from Beijing, providing formation for Chinese bishops. Feeding the homeless. Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh serves dinner. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, July 12th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining me from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. A day after disparaging NATO, the president calls the organization a fine-tuned machine. The U.S. has long called on members of the military alliance to increase defense spending, and now the president seems confident they will follow through. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump are attending a black-tie gala near Oxford, England this evening with British Prime Minister Theresa May. Tomorrow, the president will meet with Queen Elizabeth at Windsor Castle, but today he wrapped up his time with NATO allies using a reassuring tone.
The United States commitment to NATO is very strong, remains very strong.
The president expressing more optimism on day 2 of the NATO summit after blasting allies for not spending more on defense and leaving the burden on the U.S.
The tremendous expense for the United States and tremendous progress has been made. Everyone's agreed to substantially up their commitment. They're going to up it at levels that they've never thought of before.
But President Trump backed away from his demands yesterday that NATO countries double their defense budgets. The Secretary General of NATO isn't promising allies will contribute more than 2% of their GDP, a goal set back in 2014. But Jens Stoltenberg says the president's leadership is having an impact and promises cost will be shared.
The fact is that we have a clear commitment to increase defense spending, and we all agreed that we have to deliver on that.
The president now turns his attention to the United Kingdom, where he will meet with the Prime Minister and Queen Elizabeth. He'll also prepare for his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday. Today, the president raised eyebrows when he said Putin is neither friend nor enemy.
He's a competitor. You know, somebody was saying, is he an enemy? No, he's not my enemy. Is he a friend? No, I don't know him well enough. But the couple of times that I've gotten to meet him, we got along very well.
That provoked a strong rebuke from Republican Senator John McCain, who wrote, Putin is America's enemy, not because we wish it so, but because he has chosen to be. McCain says Putin helped the Syrian regime slaughter its own people, and he says another reason President Trump must hold Vladimir Putin accountable is for Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. President Trump says he will bring that up during their Monday meeting. Lauren.
Mark, the president and first lady stay in England tonight. The prime minister, Theresa May, says she welcomes the president's meeting with Putin. Why?
That's right. Prime Minister May says open channels of communication between the U.S. and Russia are key to managing the risks of confrontation. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. NATO allies are downplaying division despite the president hammering leaders over defense spending. 29 members are pledging unity. But some of the president's critics and political rivals say the United States is straining good relations with its closest friends. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. NATO leaders are promising to beef up their defense spending, but they say it's not because of attacks from President Trump. France says it's been their plan all along.
French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel leaving the final day of the NATO summit unruffled. Macron denies reports that President Trump threatened to withdraw the United States from NATO or that he pushed for a 4% defense spending goal.
Le sommet a là aussi permis d'avancer, d'une part de constater.
He says the European roadmap confirms a goal of 2% of GDP on defense spending by 2024, and France is committed to reaching it.
Deshalb war die Diskussion eben noch mal sehr wichtig, weil
Merkel, President Trump's prime target over the last 2 days, says Germany is also committed to more spending. However, she says she reminded Trump during their one-on-one meeting that her country is the second largest provider of troops within NATO. Back in the U.S., Republican Governor John Cusack of Ohio is calling out President Trump publicly.
This is not a happy day for me.
Cusack flying into Washington to tell members of the press he's worried his former political rival is fraying relationships with close allies.
There is growing disunity, growing sense of a lack of trust, a growing sense of can we depend on the United States at particular moments in time.
Cusack says he agrees the president should hold other countries responsible for their pledges. But the former Republican presidential candidate says today's NATO summit is one in a series of missteps. The others include the president's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord and leaving the Iran nuclear deal.
Today, John Cusack also expressed his concerns over the president's tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. Many worry the tariffs will lead to a trade war with China. On a side note, Cusack also was pressed today about whether or not he would consider a run for president in either 2020 or beyond. Cusack says he doesn't know for sure, but it is a possibility. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Democrats worry Roe versus Wade hangs in the balance with the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. The issue of abortion could also impact the midterm elections, and attention is now shifting to the states. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Justice Anthony Kennedy's upcoming retirement has raised both fears and hopes that a conservative majority on the court could overrule Roe. State lawmakers are looking for ways to either gut or enshrine abortion into state law, and some Democrats on Capitol Hill say Brett Kavanaugh poses a big threat.
Can you think of a case that deserves to be overturned?
Yes.
Would you volunteer one?
No.
Judge Brett Kavanaugh does analyze former Justice William Rehnquist's dissenting opinion in Roe v. Wade.
He explained that a law prohibiting an abortion, even where the mother's life was in jeopardy, would violate the Constitution. But otherwise, he stated the states had the power to legislate with regard to this matter.
Abortion advocates say they're alarmed Kavanaugh could be the deciding vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. The big question, how will the issue impact Democrats up for re-election?
Do you fear that talking about Roe so much will impact or hurt the Democrats that are in conservative states, those states that have pro-life laws?
We are out to make sure people understand that with Judge Kavanaugh on the bench, 5 men will then most likely vote to overturn Roe v. Wade and have unending consequences for women.
Pro-abortion Democrats coup over Senator Tammy Duckworth's 3-month-old baby girl. The images sparked outrage on social media. Meg tweets, "It's an alternative universe from mine, cradling a baby while agitating for the right to terminate them." And Beth says, irony is dead. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas says Roe v. Wade took away power from the states, and that should change.
It took the question of abortion away from elected legislatures, and instead it created decades of societal division.
Now, 4 state laws would trigger bans on most abortions if Roe is overruled. That's Louisiana, Mississippi, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Now, if Roe is overturned, other states could quickly move to do the same. Now, on the other hand, there's 10 states that have old abortion bans still on the books, and people in those states could scramble to get rid of them. Lauren?
And I understand voters in 2 states are going to vote on pro-life referendum?
That's right. Alabama's would recognize the sanctity of unborn life, while West Virginia's referendum would state that there's no right to abortion. These issues will be on the ballot this November.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi, and you will be following them closely, I'm sure. Thank you, Jason. Fireworks today on Capitol Hill. Several heated exchanges between lawmakers and FBI agent Peter Strzok. His partisan text messages about Donald Trump fueled suspicions of bias.
I'm stating to you, it is not my understanding that he kicked me off because of any bias, that it was done based on the appearance. If you want to represent what you said accurately, I'm happy to answer that question, but I don't appreciate what was originally said being changed.
I don't give a damn what you appreciate, Agent Strzok. I don't appreciate having an FBI agent with an unprecedented level of animus working on 2 major investigations during 2016.
Strzok was testifying for the first time publicly since his removal from the team looking into possible collusion by Russia in the election. He also worked on that investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. We will have more analysis on this later in the show. An armed man was shot and killed earlier this week inside the compound of the Archdiocese of Cebu in the Philippines. Local media report the suspect asked to see the Archbishop and refused to leave the premises. Police say he was battling depression. Rebels in Syria have agreed to surrender the first city to revolt against President Bashar Assad. Protests in Dara in 2011 against the government ignited a national revolt. Syria eventually descended into a full-blown civil war that has claimed the lives of some 400,000 people. Government forces began an offensive last month to retake the southern part of the country. Catholic leaders are challenging a long-standing Protestant march in Scotland. This year in Glasgow, participants spat on and verbally abused a Catholic priest as he stood outside his church. The Orange Walk takes place every year on July 7th. It marks the victory of William of Orange over Catholic King James II, and that was in 1690. For more on this story, including the Glasgow Diocese reaction to the incident, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Pope Francis pays a public tribute to a former Vatican foreign minister who passed away earlier this week. The funeral for French Cardinal Jean-Louis Tauran took place today inside St. Peter's Basilica. Cardinal Angelo Sodano, the Dean of Colleges of Cardinals, celebrated the Mass. Pope Francis attended and gave the final blessing. Cardinal Tauran died last week at the age of 75 after a long battle with Parkinson's. He's best remembered as announcing Pope Francis to the world in 2013. China and the Vatican are continuing to negotiate a possible agreement over the appointment of Chinese bishops. Monsignor Anthony Figueredo, an EWTN senior contributor, just returned from a visit to Beijing. Last week before his trip, he described Catholics there as sheep without a shepherd. Monsignor joins us now from Rome. Welcome back to the program. Tell us why you were in China.
I've literally just come back. I feel like St. Paul coming from a missionary journey over 10,000 kilometers on the invitation of the bishops of China, the government of China, and with the support of the Holy See, to specifically see how we can help the bishops in this great moment of change for Chinese society and also relationships between the Church of China and the Vatican.
They've been strained. What is the current situation?
There's great optimism, Lauren, I must say. You know that the Holy Father has said we need to move on 3 levels. The diplomatic level, we need to move on the level of friendship, and the third level is the cultural, intellectual. And he said that's the most important. And for 10 years, I have been going to China to specifically form bishops, priests, seminarians, and religious, so that when China eventually opens out, there may be a great army ready to evangelize a nation of 2 billion people. That's 1/5 of the world's population.
I know that there has been a lot of tension, a lot of controversy. Many critics say that the church is selling out, trying to broker a deal with China. So why does the church want to negotiate with a government that engages in systematic religious persecution?
For the simple reason, and I take some words of Pope Francis, who is following absolutely the line of St. John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI. Pope Francis in recent days said something which is so key to me, and I think to the whole world and to all of your viewers. I prefer the risk of dialogue to the certain defeat of not speaking. Think about that. I think that's the case for any situation, whether it's marriage, whether it's a great nation. Either we build bridges or we build walls. Persecution exists, absolutely, but we either work within the system to reform, or we stay completely on the sidelines and criticize, or we begin to judge, and nothing really happens. It is amazing, Lauren, when I go to China and speak with the bishops, speak with the seminarians, speak with the religious, speak with ordinary lay faithful, lives begin to change. For the first time, the Chinese government and the bishops are allowing professors from the United States universities to come to China and to begin to give courses, form seminarians, bishops, priests. This is amazing that there is an opening on this level. Again, we're not talking on the diplomatic or political level. We need to leave that aside. But if we are allowed to evangelize, we need to take that opportunity and to go back again.
Thank you so much, Monsignor Anthony Figueredo, EWTN senior contributor.
And I count, and China counts, on the prayers of all your viewers. Thank you, Lauren.
The Trump administration says eligible children taken from their parents at the border have been reunited. We have analysis. And a veteran Washington journalist weighs in on a busy week in the nation's capital. The Trump administration says all eligible children under the age of 5 separated from their families as a result of its zero-tolerance immigration policy have been reunited with their parents. Of the 103 children covered by the court mandate to reunify families separated, 57 have been reunited. 46 children remain separated because of safety concerns or that their parents have been deported or are in custody for other offenses. Joining me now is Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of The Hill. Bob, welcome back.
Hey, Lauren.
The Trump administration faces another deadline on July 26th. That's when it has to return 2,000 children older than the age of 5 to their families. Is this issue of how to handle illegal immigration going to burn out, or are we going to see it all the way up till the midterms?
I think we're going to see it go into the fall because the administration is having a difficult time reuniting these families, which I guess in hindsight is not really hard to see that this is not an easy task. So I think they've struggled in the beginning. They're probably going to struggle going forward. And certainly Republicans want this out of the headlines. But I think we're going to see it with these deadlines and also missed deadlines. I think it's going to be a problem for Republicans this fall, especially, remember, a lot of Republicans in swing districts in the House, they represent districts with a lot of Latinos. So that could be a problem, especially in California. That's going to be a problem for them.
Let's move on to the Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
Today, what a hearing that was, with Peter Strzok. So
Yeah.
Peter Strzok wrote negative texts about President Trump. Peter Strzok was working for the FBI, and at the FBI, he was handling the investigations into President Trump. This is the first time we've seen him publicly. We've seen him in the closed doors. But I don't know about you, but I felt the nastiness coming out of this hearing room was unprecedented.
Yeah,
Your thoughts?
No, it was it's been one of the most contentious hearings I've ever seen. You had Democrats clapping for Strzok, and one Democrat saying you give him a Purple Heart, and other Republicans saying, what are you, crazy? You
and Darrell Issa, Representative Darrell Issa, made him read his texts that had vulgarities in them. And then Representative Jackson Lee held up Paul Manafort's mugshot that was just released to the media today.
It is crazy, and then you saw a lot of, Lisa Page, who was having the affair with him. Certainly Strzok and Page used poor judgment here. But the big issue for Republicans is going after what they say was a clear bias, and he
and
was
that was
biased.
mentioned. The reason you're bringing that up is because that was actually mentioned in the hearing.
Yes, Louis Gohmert mentioned the hearing that he basically saying Peter Strzok's a liar, and he's probably lied to his wife about Lisa Page because they're having an affair. So this was just an ugly, ugly hearing. But do we get a lot of news? I mean, there's certain things Strzok wouldn't say because he said the FBI he can't say. So it was just a partisan battle that was really not a high point for Congress.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I completely agree with you. He is really the poster boy right now for our partisan divide. And I agree with you that the antics distracted from the actual testimony and finding out what happened, along with the obstruction. I mean, he was not forthcoming.
Right, he wasn't, and he was also combative. I mean, there were members of Congress were certainly combative with him on the Republican side, but he was giving it back to them. So that only added to the theater.
That's right. He said to them at one point that this was deeply, what did he say, deeply divisive, and what they were doing. So Thank you so much. Nasty on the Hill today. Thank you so much for joining us, Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief for The Hill. Tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, how science is advancing the pro-life movement.
It's really critical because when you look at chemistry class, every chemistry class has the periodic table. No high school student graduates without knowing that H2O is water. But they can graduate without knowing that they begin as a single-cell human being at the beginning of the process of fertilization.
You can see Catherine Hadrow's interview tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on EWTN, or head to EWTN.com for other times. Coming up, why Croatia has at least a prayer of beating France in the World Cup final. And Judge Brett Kavanaugh takes off his black robe and dons a blue apron. Croatia, a majority Catholic country, has reached the World Cup final, and its coach is a man of deep faith. Zlatko Dalic credits his success to his faith in God. He always carries a rosary, wears a crucifix, as you can see in this photo right here. Before the tournament, he told Croatian Catholic radio, quote, "Everything I have done in my life and in my professional career I owe to my faith, and I am grateful to my Lord." Joining me now is Doug Eldridge, sports agent, PR consultant, managing partner at DLE Agency. Doug, as we just heard, he is a deep man of faith. It clearly plays a role in his life, and there's been a lot of faith on display. According to FIFA's website, I was surprised to see that the logo was inspired by Russian icon painting, which I thought was fascinating. Pope Francis absolutely loves to talk about soccer. Sure. So what is the role that faith does play? We've talked about it in football. Football plays a role, faith plays a role in football. What about soccer?
Well, we've always referred to it as the proverbial Trojan horse. Sport is the thing that breaches the gates and allows the people to let their guard down, and in so doing, bring a broader message. In this case, when you look at the World Cup, when you look at FIFA, 4 years ago, over 3 billion people watched the World Cup. That's roughly half of the population of the world, Lauren. There's no other event on any level in any category that reaches that audience. And to your point about the Croatian coach, while I wouldn't equate France to Goliath, Croatia certainly embodies the role of David. The question is, will they remain the poor shepherd boy in a country of 4 million people? New York City has 8.5 million. Or will they rise to king status? They're making their first World Cup final appearance. They're the smallest country in 68 years to ever make the final, and only the 13th country to ever make it.
And England, boy, did they take a beating yesterday. I don't want to talk about
Tremendous
that.
Game.
It was a tough loss for them. You know, President Vladimir Putin says hosting the World Cup has, quote, broken down stereotypes about his country. We saw North Korea in the Winter Olympics. Yes. Do you think that this World Cup rehabilitated Russia's image, especially ahead of Putin's meeting next week with President Trump?
Well, I think it depends on the angle, and I would address that through two lenses. One is on the broader global scale, peace through sport, right? It's a riff on the old Reagan peace through strength metaphor, right? I think for so many countries, large-scale sporting events is an opportunity to show their other side. But I think when you come to Putin, a former KGB agent, it's an opportunity to show national strength. You have to pivot back to Mikhail Gorbachev and the Cold War and the Soviet Union and the doping program and all the Olympic gold medals. Sports and military carried a close parallel there in terms of being emblematic of national strength. Now, what it's done for their country, I was over in Russia in 2014 for the Winter Olympics. I was just over in Korea for the Winter Olympics. And in both of those instances, it did allow the host nation to show a softer, more global, more welcoming side. So in a limited context, I would agree with this statement.
Okay, I have to go to Wimbledon.
Yes.
I'm a big tennis fan,
yes.
Huge, and Serena Williams gave birth to a baby girl 10 months ago, and today, look what she did. She is going to the women's final for the 10th time. I'm fascinated about the relationship between birth, baby, and work. Has anyone won a Grand Slam after having a baby like this?
I can't speak to post-delivery or post-child, but I think the proximity to giving birth is a little bit longer than 10 months, but here's the real complicating issue, Lauren. She had blood clots prior to the pregnancy. She had an emergency C-section. She had blood clots while in the hospital just days after giving birth. And there was a fantastic article earlier this year in Vogue magazine where Serena really went into, but here's where I'm going with this.
Okay, let's hear it.
Went really in depth about how parenting and being a mother has changed her life. And she gave birth to a baby girl. And she talked about how her daughter has shown her not only a different side of life, but a different side of herself. That duality of champion and challenger, facing a whole new obstacle and taking it on with the same further. And I think in so many ways, in an era where athletes are often criticized for lacking priorities, lacking morality, I think Serena is a testament to a champion across the board, not only on the court, but in the broader game of life. And I think she's certainly leading by example in terms of parenting.
Doug Eldridge, managing partner at DLE Agency. You always have great thoughts about sports. Thank you from somebody who doesn't quite understand sports so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Finally tonight, Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh rolls up his sleeves to help the homeless. Kavanaugh served sandwiches and mac and cheese last night in downtown Washington at Maria's Meals. He spent an hour volunteering for that program, which is run by Catholic Charities, and the head of DC's Catholic Charities right there is Monsignor John Ensler. He runs it, and he likes to be called Father John. Father John says the nominee keeps a low profile, adding he is a man for others. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night and God bless.